Professor Vine was standing between the students and the creature now, which she would only describe now as a lich, a powerful mage brought back from the dead. In all her lifetime of seeing the impossible, she never expected to see this. And it shouldn't have been possible, but it did make sense for all the information that she had gathered. There was no other way to describe it. For, if anyone was to be a lich, it had to be someone who was as wicked in life as they were in death. Vine shook her hand and got into a fighting stance. I have to say, headmistress, it is an honor to meet you. I will confess that I use many of your teaching approaches. Well, except for devouring the life force of my students. The creature gave a toothless grin. More death. Grimwick could see a smirk forming on Vine's face, like she enjoyed this. You kept many dark spells for yourself. No one ever did figure out how to replicate your life draining techniques. It was said not only to extend your life, but give you additional power as well. Unfortunately for you, I don't need the energy of others. Vine punched the air and a blue orb flashed towards the creature, exploding into a ball of blue fire. Grimwick's mouth hung open. The energy and debris swirled about the air. All right, students, time to go. Professor Nickel appeared. Vine's got this, and I'm getting you out. I want to watch, Grimwick said. Professor Nickel looked down and alarmed. You can talk? Or am I just losing my mind? Whichever it is, we definitely need to get out of here. So they all began to run towards the exit. Norbert was pulling Grimwick by the arm, and all he could see was Vine's eye train through the smoke. When they were almost at the exit, a scream stopped them in their tracks. Norbert dropped Grimwick on his head, and the whole room was spinning now. Then everything happened in slow motion. The wounded lich was now behind Professor Crinkle. The creature reached for Crinkle with that green aura. Crinkle was unaware that she was about to be the monster's next meal. Vine fired another blue orb. It connected with her targets, but just dust and debris flew around the room. If Grimwick made out of this alive, he really needed to learn some of these spells from Vine. Another different scream came from the dust. It was a scream of surprise and alarm, no doubt Crinkle's. The exit was still far off. Nickel was trying to pick up the students. We need to go. This isn't good. Then a green flame arose around the door and around the perimeter of the whole mausoleum. Oh, no one is getting out of here, said a fuller voice from the dust. Not until I've had my fill. The smoke departed. The creature's stringy hair was now fuller, like spider webs. Her eyes glowing. Her skin was gray and deathly. There was more muscle and flesh to it. She looked human, but one with very clearly evil intentions. Even parts of her robe seemed to have been patched up. Laying at her feet was a lump that looked like Professor Crinkle. Let's try this again, shall we? The headmistress smiled. The undead headmistress fired a blue orb back at Vine. It struck with such force that it seemed double of what Vine had produced earlier. The ground shook on impact. All of Grimwick's hair stood up. He could feel the dark energy coming closer and quick. She's coming, he yelled. Rocks resembling rib cages erupted from the ground and formed a circle around the students. A golden bubble of light covered the gaps in between. Grimwick turned and Nickel was the one making the barrier. The flash of the green monster's hand was outside the bubble. The dust parted for a moment, and they could make out the headmistress smiling, now a full set of yellow teeth. Then a fist covered in blue aura smashed into the monster's face. Vine whipped by, her hat still on. Dust covered any views of the scuffle. The only sound to escape the dust cloud were that of crashing objects, physical blows, and explosive spells being exchanged. The students, Nickel and Grimwick, huddled inside the makeshift barrier. Then all was quiet. Out of the dust, a body hit the barrier. Stuck on top of the golden bubble was Vine, her face bloody, her nose broken, her hat missing. Oh, dragons, let her in, Norbert yelled. Vine shook her head and mouthed the words, run. She was pulled back into the dust. The only sounds Grimwick could hear in the bubble were the students whimpering. Grimwick was the one growing anxious. Let me out of here, you scaredy cat. I don't like her, but she's our only ticket out of here, and we have to help her. Nickel stood up and put his hand in front of Grimwick. You children stay here. I'll distract the monster. You run, and don't look back. Nickel kept the rocks up but dropped the energy shield. Vine was held up by her neck, surrounded by the green aura. The monster seemed to be straining to drain Vine's energy. My, still strong, even with a broken body. No matter. I'll drain your students and come back for you. The monster looked towards Professor Nickel. If you want these students, you'll have to go through me, he said. Nickel shot a yellow orb at the creature. The headmistress caught the magical orb and held it in her hand. Don't play with things you can't control. She shot it back and connected with Nickel. He flew over the barrier and landed somewhere behind. He began to moan in pain. Now, which of you is first? Please do scream. Students are always my favorite. Grimwick jumped up front. Mophead, launch me! Red did. Grimwick flew in the air, claws extended. The headmistress was amused. This trick again. How amusing. She opened her hand. A tiny red orb flew out and smashed into Grimwick's face. He could feel the bones in his skull breaking. He went flying back at such speeds he wasn't even sure if he would teleport until he landed into Norbert's belly. Grimwick pulled himself up. His vision was blurry, but as he adjusted his jaw, he could feel his bones healing. Interesting. The headmistress stared. It seems your summoner is able to heal you by giving you some of his own energy. I might need to research you two a bit more. But all right, which one of you is next? I'll save the fat, juicy one and his cat for dessert. So will it be the one who needs a haircut, or the one who we could use as a jump rope? Penelope and Red fired shots after a shot at the headmistress, who didn't even pretend to block them now. The spell simply bounced off her. Grimwick looked. The students were sending their best spells with no effect. Nickel was still moaning somewhere in the background, and Vine, with her broken bones, was struggling to get up. The headmistress was basking in it all. Oh, how I've missed the land of the living. The dead have no fighting spirit. Yes, I think I'm very much going to enjoy this. Grimwick looked to Vine and yelled, Is that all you've got, Vine? You said you were the strongest mage ever, and you're getting beat by a dead zombie? I know you've got some dark spells. I can sense it. Now use them! Vine was out of breath, and the headmistress looked down at him. Amusing cat. If she is the strongest mage alive, then this world has gotten weak, and is ripe for my conquering. Now watch as I drain your friends and your master. She held out her hand, the green aurora growing. Grimwick did the only thing that he could think of. He jumped up and sank his teeth into her rotten hand. Vine watched as the cat bought the students a few more seconds of life. He kept his teeth sunk into her hand and his claws were scratching at her arms. The cat was right. She did know some forbidden spells, but they were dark, and there was no going back once she used them. In fact, Vine knew so many dark spells that she locked them away by placing magical runes on her own body. She wasn't sure if it was from the pride of not wanting to lose, the concern for the safety of her students, or that the cat was now making crude gestures in her direction, but she unlocked her seal. Eventually, the headmistress dislodged Grimwick's jaw from her hand. Grimwick was trying to wipe the taste of rotten flesh from his mouth when an explosion of energy came from Vine. It shook the room with such force that even the headmistress stopped her spell to see what was going on. Vine's eyes had grown pitch black. Her hair whipped around like fire. Black energy was circulating all around her. She was like an octopus on fire. Very different kind of monster. Grimwick could feel it. This was dark energy. Something as dark or even darker than whatever the headmistress could muster. So much so that Vine's broken limbs began to pop back into place. From what Grimwick could sense, these two powers were now almost equal, but far greater than him or any of these students could muster. The headmistress started, Well, this is an interesting turn. But before she could finish, Vine smashed the headmistress's head and sent her flying into the wall. Norbert, grab Professor Nickel and get him here. I need you all to stay in the same spot. Norbert hustled out of the barrier and began to drag the necromancy teacher back to the barrier. The headmistress sent a blue orb at Vine. Vine caught it and sent it back to the headmistress, adding her own magic to make the explosion more powerful. Dust once again swirled about the room. Then the two went back to exchanging blows. Grimwick could only catch it through glimpses of the clouds. The two seemed to be summoning rocks to spring off of and seemed to be floating in the air. Every time they made contact, the ground shook. Grimwick could see it. The headmistress was losing energy, and in her eyes were growing desperate. She made a dart for the students, but Vine blocked her and sent her the other way. Vine was right. Playing defense would just drain the creature. When the opportunity presented itself, she could strike the final blow. But cornered and hungry creatures can be a scary and dangerous thing, and the headmistress could feel it. She coiled up and sprang a new spell. Both her and Vine were now out of position from the students. Vine realized this and yelled, Norbert, shield! Norbert began to wave his hand in a frantic motion. Nothing came out. Nickel tried to summon his, but it kept fading. Red was trying to build up the rock barrier, and Penelope tried to create a bubble of wind. Grimwick watched through the holes in the rock. The creature sent out a rushing wave of energy that extended from her hands. Vine matched it with a spell of her own. The green and black tides wrestled with each other, going one way and then another. The center was brewing a white, hot orb. That would definitely be the kill shot. Too much energy and no time for defense. Giving in to the attack for defense would result in certain impact and death. Both Vine and the headmistress were now giving everything they had to make sure that the orb didn't touch them. The headmistress was beginning to lose her hair. Her skin was drying out. Vine's sleeves were tearing. Black runes danced on her arms, but it was working. Grimwick could see that the white orb was moving closer and closer to the headmistress every time. Vine was winning this duel. Norbert still didn't have the shield up, and Grimwick got as low to the ground as he could. It would be over soon, and when it did, it would be an explosion for the ages, possibly even big enough to destroy the whole mausoleum. The headmistress let out one more cry, and then the orb released in an immense explosion. Grimwick dug his claws into the ground, the rock barrier in front of him tearing away. The rush of energy flowed overhead. The 3 students in nickel were now screaming, which is okay, for as long as they did, it meant that they were alive. Then it all went quiet. The green flames that lit the mausoleum were extinguished. The only light now was coming from the ground. The ground itself was like burnt coal, gave the room a hollowed feel. All the students were injured and sore, but managed to get to their feet. Penelope created a light and lit up the room. The rock barriers had all been wiped away, and there was an impact crater where the headmistress once stood. Grimwick could sense that her energy was gone, but it was good to have visual confirmation. Vine's energy levels were dramatically dropping as well. She made a motion over her chest, and her eyes returned to normal, and her runes stopped moving. She collapsed to the floor, her bones apparently still broken. But she did give a thumbs up to the group from the ground. Then behind her there was some motion in the shadows, and then a shimmer of a knife. A husk of a creature stood over the deflated and broken Vine. All Vine could do was watch as the scorned husk plunged the knife down. Grimwick put his paws together and fired a tiny white orb. And just in time, it hit the husk of the creature, and it turned down to dust when the spell made impact. Norbert shuffled over to Vine, and Grimwick ran towards the knife. The tiny hat confirmed that it was Crinkle back from one last attempt. But the blade was something different. It was wavy and had an unusual pattern to it. But before Grimwick could study it too much, Vine snatched it from his hands. "Hey!" Grimwick said. "Cats shouldn't play with knives," Vine said. Before Grimwick could complain, the always caring Norbert chimed in. "Professor Vine, are you okay?" "Yes," Mr. said. "I'll be okay. I just will need some help walking out." Norbert leaned down and propped her up on his side, taking the pressure off of her broken foot. "Thank you, Mr. Soot. Since there was an actual monster, I'll remove the 2 strikes that I had against you. It seems there was no ghost after all. And Miss Cress and Mr. Doe, I will consider your detention served." Norbert said, "We can talk about this later." But Vine continued, "But you are not off the hook, Mr. Soot. You did summon a demon into this world, and you will still have to serve detention with me for the rest of the semester." Norbert gave a little smile. He knew this was the best kind of thanks he was going to get. Professor Vine looked down at the cat. Her nose twitched a little. That cat helped more than I'd care to admit. Dare I even say he seemed concerned? Grimwick turned his nose away. Tisk. I just didn't want any potential host getting hurt, that's all. I'm still going to take over this world, after all. Vine offered a smile. We'll see about that, cat. Now come, let's depart this place. "Oh, pooey," said the cloaked figure. "Seems Crinkle has become a stinkle, probably because she couldn't handle the headmistress. Do you think she's gotten eaten, or just botched up the resurrection spell?" "Neither, my dear sister," said another cloaked figure. The other gasped. "Do you think she was murdered?" "The plot twist!" The other remained stoic. "No, dear sister, the famed headmistress is a bit of a long shot, one of whom I bet she had her own agenda. I didn't really expect Crinkle to ascend to our ranks. In fact, she did a little bit more than I was expecting of her." The one called sister came up to the orb. "Is that why you're smiling, brother?" "No, that's not it at all. I'm smiling because our dear sister seems to have returned from the grave." They looked towards the candles for confirmation. "Seems father's favorite was on Cragstone this whole time."